As I stated previously, many of our breakout sessions coincide with the themes of the Onondaga County Comprehensive Plan, one of which is greenways and blueways. Our keynote speaker, Mr. Paul Steely White, has extensive experience in this area and is the executive director of Parks and Trails New York, an Albany-based nonprofit membership organization that strives to make parks and greenway trails integral to our everyday lives. Co-recipient of the Rockefeller Foundation's Jane Jacobs Medal in recognition of his creative uses of the urban environment to build a more diverse, dynamic, and equitable city, Paul has devoted his career to improving bicycling, walking, and public open space. While executive director of Transportation Alternatives from 2004 to 2018, he grew New York City's network of greenways and bike paths and led campaigns to reclaim city parks from automobile traffic. Paul has also been recognized by the New York Academy of Medicine for his work to make streets safer and healthier. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Mr. Paul Steely White.
Thank you for that very generous introduction. It's a great time to be in Syracuse, and so much going on, right? As we heard from the county executive, there's no shortage of exciting initiatives afoot. The I-81 teardown, right, and all of the possibility that creates for reintegrating downtown. The big investment, obviously, is the major thing going on. Bus rapid transit, right? There's a BRT plan coming together. Wonderful. Jim Morrison is in town. Is that right? Did I read that? And I could have called this presentation The Doors of Opportunity, I guess. But instead you see an L. Frank Baum reference. And I had this title in the title slide, and my staff at Parks and Trails New York said, L. Frank Baum is from Syracuse. I was like, what, really? I thought so he's born in Chittenango, right? And then grew up in Syracuse, so what a wonderful coincidence that was. My three kids love The Wizard of Oz, I'm sure you do too, right? There's so much there. So much mythology, which we're often lacking in our modern lives. But those yellow bricks, I think the story goes that L. Frank Baum was arriving at a military academy in Peekskill, New York. And he gets off the boat on the Hudson River dock there, and the gentleman tells him the way he should go to walk to the military academy, and the guy said, follow the yellow brick road from the docks there. So he probably didn't say it like that, he probably said, follow the yellow brick road. But I don't know if that's a real story or not. But Syracuse seems well on its way to becoming the Emerald City, right? Or some version of it. I was reading, trying to prepare for this, I was reading this MIT Technology Review article, very long article, that chronicled the Buffalo Billions and what happened with the Buffalo Billions project, and also interviewed a number of other economic development professionals and pundits from around the country. The theme of the article was, of course, Micron coming to Syracuse. All eyes are indeed on Syracuse and Onondaga County. But the article kind of asks the questions, what could go wrong? What if we miss this opportunity? What are the pitfalls? And I think the county executive summarized them quite well. And maybe there's a few that he didn't mention, but of course, traffic. People are concerned about traffic. Are we going to see an inclusive and equitable distribution of all of the economic opportunity that's coming to Syracuse? Or will it just exacerbate existing inequalities? will indeed, as the county executive said, are we just going to get the anchor tenant, or are we going to attract additional companies and investment? And then I think a question maybe on a lot of your minds as planners, how can we parlay the investment into a more diverse economic development strategy, right? So we're not so reliant on the tech sector primarily, right? And susceptible to all of the, vagaries of the economy. And I think the answer to, all of those, or an answer to all of those concerns and challenges is really, again, what the executive referred to when he was talking about the recreational economy. I'm a big fan of Enrique Peñalosa. Has anyone ever seen Enrique Peñalosa speak? He's a former mayor of Bogota who, his brother Gil is an internationally renowned parks advocate and expert. But Enrique, when he was mayor of Bogota, Colombia, he established an amazing new paradigm, really, that the world is now following, with bus rapid transit coursing throughout the city, greenways, protected bikeways, pedestrian public space. And he was just really successful, and not just in Bogota, but really promulgating this model around the world. I had opportunities to work with him in India and Africa, spreading the gospel of this new model of development that was very different than the car-oriented model that I think many of us grew up with. But one of his great lines is that we can strive for economic equality, and indeed we should, always. But at the same time, we can maybe strive for something that's a little more achievable in the short term, and that is quality of life equality, right? And making sure that everyone has the same shot at that access to a great park or greenway or riverfront. And with all the investment coming to Syracuse, if I have a message for you today, my main message might be, do what you can as planners to make sure that the built environment ends up as equitable and inclusive, if we can say those words today, or those bad words. Make sure that it's as equitable as it can be, because after all the money spent and everything's said and done, it would really be a shame if we ended up with a lot of big warehouses and fancy jobs, and none of that really made it to the people who live here now and people who will live here for generations. So I think it's a great responsibility that we have to ensure that it goes as I think we all want it to. That's my little preach. Sorry, I won't preach anymore. Well, maybe a little bit. So when we talk about greenway trails, we're of course, people use that word greenway to mean different things, but in my presentation, we're talking about multi-use paths like the Empire State Trail, which we know and love, and really the best section of the Empire State Trail, going right through downtown Syracuse. I love that. And when Cuomo did that $200 million investment, with no federal money, by the way, that was just a state investment in the Empire State Trail, that section through Syracuse was really front and center. You see here the Hudson River Greenway on the west side of Manhattan, which is the busiest greenway trail in the United States. And I think relevant to any county or city that's trying to leverage more development and transportation network potential from greenways, because the Hudson River Greenway for a long time was all we had in New York City before we had the bike network that we have today, which is now they're widening bike lanes. For so long people said, why do we have bike lanes? No one's using them. Well, no one used them until they connected to each other. And those first connections were really made to the spine on the Hudson River Greenway. And so what y'all are doing with your Empire State Trail local economic opportunities plan, which is amazing, and your larger comprehensive plan, is really seeking to leverage the Empire State Trail and connect more multi-use trails to that, which is beautiful. Loop the lake and the creek walk, right? And I think other opportunities. So really a lot going there. And it's funny too, because bike lanes used to be controversial, and now they're not so much anymore, at least in a lot of places. In New York City, I got to meet Robert De Niro once, and he was getting this award for bringing Tribeca back from 9/11, because he really did a lot to help bring New York City back. And he says to me, so you're the guy who made all the bike lanes happen? And I said, sure, yeah, that's me. And then he says, I don't like the bike lanes. I can't do a Robert De Niro impression. And so when he said he didn't like the bike lanes, I was very quick to say, well, it wasn't really me. It was a community of advocates who made it happen, and yada, yada. And he said, no, it's not me, it's actually my driver. And so he introduced me to his driver, who explained how he had to wait longer, yada, yada. But the story of New York City today, it's far from a perfect city, as we all know. But with congestion pricing, with car-free parks, with the Greenway network, all of that controversy has really paid off. And so, I think what you're doing is maybe in some ways less controversial because you're trying to really center recreation and trails in your planning. As far as I can tell, you're doing that. That's wonderful. There will be, of course, moments where it does get controversial, and I have a few pointers for you on how to navigate those thorny thickets. This is where I live now. My family, we're in the Hudson Valley, just south of New Paltz in Gardner, New York. This is the River to Ridge Trail. That is wonderful. It connects the Empire State Trail to the splendors of the Shawangunk Ridge, and it's just wonderful if you can do it. This is not New York. This is the Beltline in Atlanta, Georgia, and I love this photo because it shows a lot of what I'd like to try to convey to you today, which is there's a lot of benefit to clustering, co-locating housing and affordable housing right next to greenways. And there's even a couple of examples happening in the Hudson Valley that I'll share with you in a moment. But there's something about greenways too that I think makes people more comfortable with density and more comfortable with sometimes controversial topics of walkability or bikeability or limiting parking. And I was talking to the mayor of New Paltz a couple weeks ago, Tim Rogers, and he was saying that how the few developments that they've seen on the Greenway network in New Paltz have really achieved a greater consensus among folks on both sides of the aisle about the proper role of density and, as the executive was saying, something other than single-family detached housing. This is a page from your local economic opportunities playbook and some of the trail connections that you might be trying to seek. The state bicycle routes, Route 11, and is it Route 5 or Route 31, east-west, north of town? I hope is there anyone from state DOT here in the room? Okay, so I can talk a little smack, that's okay. And by the way, you guys planners are, the story of New York City was largely about wresting control from the traffic engineers and giving it to the planners. We love traffic engineers, especially the enlightened ones. But that dynamic is so important. But the state DOT here in New York still has a long way to go. I mean, these state, quote, bicycle routes are just signs. I mean, they're dangerous. They're often the most dangerous places to ride. And I would submit that let's take those signs down if there's not going to be any meaningful infrastructure there. This is a caricature of the kind of person that you might attract in the near-term future. The dreaded bike geek, tech geek. This is actually outdated, because a lot of the stereotypical techies who like to ride their bikes or like to live in vibrant urban centers have grown up. This is a photo of the current Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, and it's really about parents wanting their kids to have a safe walk or bike to school, right? Or being able to enjoy yourselves on the weekend. And County Executive McMahon was saying that Micron's decision to locate here had a lot to do with the recreational opportunities that you have here. And I would submit that if we're going to see those multiplier effects and going beyond just the initial anchor investment, it's going to be answering those concerns. Am I going to have the livability and the quality of life? Are my kids going to have that? And I realize that I'm really running behind here. What time is it? Okay, we'll keep it moving. So this is just a quick summary of what I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes about parks and trails in New York. So I've been very lucky to be the executive director of this amazing organization for the past 2 years. We're based in Albany. That woman with the megaphone is Robin Dropkin. She was my predecessor who ran the organization for 20 years. You probably don't know who she is, but if you enjoy our state park system in any capacity, you should know who she is and her legacy, because that's her saving the system from budget cuts in 2010 when the fiscal crisis was causing the state to shutter like 100 state parks. And I think Green Lakes was one of them on the chopping block. And this was the first salvo, I think, in an ongoing battle to convince the governor and our legislator that recreational opportunities are not just frivolities, right? They're not just window dressing. They're serious assets for our economy, and we have to protect them and grow them as such. And so that's what we do at Parks and Trails. We look out for the state park system. We are desperately trying to grow the Greenway network so that it reaches all New Yorkers. And really our vision is a state where every single New Yorker has easy access to the kind of natural opportunities that we now know are vital to our physical and mental health. You probably know that since COVID, visitorship at our state parks has been growing astronomically. The secret's out. And those 88 million visitors to the state parks last year, that doesn't include, by the way, Adirondacks and Catskills. It doesn't include the Greenway network. That's just the state park system. There's about 248 state parks and historic sites. And just a month ago, we convened a lot of state park advocates in Albany for a big advocacy day fighting for the state parks budget. And it's really wonderful to be part of a growing movement with people from all corners of life, all sectors. Colliers, thank you so much for sponsoring this, and I think helping pay my way here today. Thank you for being supporters of Parks and Trails New York. We have a lot of members of what I like to call the Parks Industrial Complex coming to lobby with us in Albany, all the design and engineering firms who are doing the amazing work to keep the facilities going. We have this great Trail Towns program where we're working with communities all along the Empire State Trail to help them leverage the economic development opportunities of the trail, and we know there are many. And our Trail Town program is interesting, and this is, I think, very relevant to your challenges here in Onondaga County, which is, how can we not just grow the trail network, which includes protected bike lanes and other corridors, but how can we leverage the land use around it for further economic value? And that, at first, for conservationists to think about development, it's like, wait, what? But increasingly, even very deep green environmentalists are now getting on board with this notion that wouldn't it be great to actually cluster housing proximate to natural areas in the right way, and giving people, again, that integrated everyday opportunity to experience recreation in nature. And there's a wonderful state legislator in Kingston, New York, Sarahana Shrestha, who, like Enrique Peñalosa, is talking about that quality of life equality that's possible. And so more trail towns are doing not just placemaking and connectors to the Empire State Trail, but starting to look at what kinds of zoning, land use policies will facilitate more of that kind of healthy development around the network. So looking at like a half mile on either side of a greenway trail and asking the question of how can we optimize that land? Because it's where people want to be. If you look at what's happening with housing demand in the Hudson Valley and developer interest, it's all about the Greenway Trail Network. The state has a wonderful plan that we're watchdogging to make sure it moves forward. And the vision for this state is not so different from your vision here in the county, which is, again, to establish these connector trails to the main network, to the main spine. And so in yellow, I don't know if you can see, there's all these new projects coming to fruition. Well, more in process than coming to fruition. You see there's over 500 miles of new greenway projects happening statewide. This is a report that we put out about every 18 months, and I have some copies of it up here for you to take away. It's the statewide Greenway Trails Progress Report. And you'll see a region by region accounting. And this is the other big report that you can also find up here by the window if you're interested. Limited number. It's a guide for developing greenway trails for local planners, advocates, from soup to nuts, sort of what you do. And you probably know a lot of this already, but the great thing happening too is this community of folks that's coming together statewide to further expand the network. That's now State Senator Patricia Fahey, who has a bill package that would give counties the flexibility to use their state highway maintenance dollars for greenway trail maintenance. And this is something that I think it makes a lot of sense, and a lot of counties are asking for it. And it would also allow counties to count for their formula, for the formula that determines the money that flows, to count their greenway trails towards their total. And I think this would really eliminate a perverse incentive that exists now for counties to often just build more roads so they get more CHIPS money instead of, right, I see some heads nodding, thank you. This is a study that we released last year looking at the economic impact of the state park system, not including the greenway trails. And the big takeaway is that state parks like Green Lakes, statewide, that the economic impact of that system is now actually larger than the state's agricultural sector. So that was surprising for us to discover that, because if you look at how much weight the ag sector throws in Albany and how much, how many subsidies they pull down and how much command they have. And we love our farmers, don't get me wrong, we're not trying to displace our farmers, but to say that the recreational economy is now as big and maybe a little bit bigger is really heartening, I think, for a lot of us. We are working on a similar study on the Greenway Trail Network. This is one we did about 10 years ago, finding about $250 million in economic impact of the Empire State Trail as it existed then, right, before the big $200 million investment. So we're overdue for a new study. And you see here the counts here in Syracuse of users of the Empire State Trail. That's Buffalo, all the way to the left there. And then you see the daily counts in Syracuse. And so as we do this study, we're going to be very, very sure that we do a nice deep dive on Onondaga County and looking at how those visitors to the Empire State Trail are spending their money locally. But we might agree that the economic impact of recreation and the trail specifically has more to do with how it's attracting investment. And again, winning the economy, right, in today's world is all about providing that quality of life for a very mobile workforce that can really locate anywhere. And as companies are making the decision to follow Micron to Onondaga County and making the decision how many of their employees they might want to have on site versus working remotely, I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that we are demonstrating this investment and making this investment real so that people have a tangible quality of life that is going to work for them and for their families. So we're all familiar with smart growth and TOD, transit-oriented development. What we're working on at Parks and Trails is a trail-oriented development package that borrows from the best trail programs and projects from around the country, like the Beltline in Atlanta, like the Midtown Greenway in Minneapolis, like the Cultural Trail in Indianapolis, which is an amazing asset that they have there that's only come to fruition in the last few years. And this is our vision for New York State, is to really make trail-oriented development a big deal so that hopefully in the next 5 years, we'll have a real state-sponsored economic development program that is funding and the capital maintenance and also working with counties and localities to optimize zoning to encourage this right kind of development. And we're in touch with Governor Hochul's Pro-Housing Communities program and there's a lot of brewing excitement around how we can make this happen. The key elements, of course, are density, and which we'll talk a little bit more about in a sec. Affordable housing, there's a Kingston, New York, and also in my native New Paltz, the trail developments that are going in there, pretty similar to, I think, some of the formulas you're using here to incentivize and define affordable housing. But there's an ongoing debate of how affordable is affordable. And so that's going to be a big one. Public access. If you have trail adjacent projects that aren't improving access, you're doing something wrong. We've seen projects that preclude access, and we have to make sure that those pathways to the trail are there for everyone. Public amenities like restrooms, bike racks. You'd be surprised how many buildings are facing the trail but have just a blank facade and don't have like a human scale invitation to come in. So frontage and facade is very important. And all of this hopefully adding up to a 5-minute neighborhood, right? Where you have a multi-use, accessible building next to a trail that incites more of that kind of development. And then eventually you have a cluster where people can get goods and services within a 5-mile walk. 5-minute walk, rather. If you walk, 5-minute walk. I'm gonna skip over this. So this is Zero Place. If y'all are in New Paltz anytime soon, just north of town, please stop by Zero Place. It's a LEED certified building. It's 4 stories, which is a big deal for New Paltz. I think the kind of suburban mindset that we're coming out of, as the executive referred to, this is something that was very real in New Paltz. But today it's a huge success, and it's really been a catalyst for a lot of development in this same trail corridor that's north of town on the Empire State Trail. That's 2 of my kids, that's Ray and Ivy, and they love coming to Zero Place because we get to ride our bikes, park our bikes, and get the best croissants in Ulster County. That's the owner chef, Noah. But what's really amazing about this building is that it does most of what was in the previous slide and has actually really, I think, caused a real stir in Ulster County about how we can even take it further, maybe even looking at denser buildings, limiting car parking, doing bike parking. Car parking next to the trail is great, but it shouldn't be right next to the trail, right? You should have proximity for people who are arriving on active transportation. Maybe put your handicap or your disabled parking right next to the trail, but the rest you might want to leave a little off to the side. But what we're seeing is this real conversation between municipalities and planners and developers, again, who are increasingly interested in these trailside developments. I mentioned parking. I just wanted to shout out to Don Shoop. Any Shoopistas in the crowd? Nice. Shoop Doggy Dog, as he was known. He passed away last month, but really a hero to urbanists everywhere, and really anyone that's looking for a smarter way to regulate parking supply, both on-street and off-street. Kingston eliminated parking minimums, largely inspired by Don's work just last year. And I think it's going to be a real key to your success here, because if you don't address parking policy, you could end up with oversupply and a really marred pedestrian environment. And highly encourage all of you to not just look at what Don did in his research and his praxis, but what Kingston is now doing. And Kingston just won the Congress for New Urbanism Award for not just their parking minimum policy, but also their form-based code, which is a really amazing piece of work that Dover and Cole actually did, right? Dover and Cole, the same firm that's doing the I-81, really seeking to facilitate a lot of context and historic sensitive infill and multifamily development in and around Kingston to address the housing affordability crisis. Coming towards the end here, my work is sometimes, technical and plannerly, but really most often it's political. And I've seen a lot of projects fail, and I've seen projects obviously succeed to varying degrees. But really what often makes the difference is the extent to which you have a lot of strange bedfellows working together for the same end goal. And That's what we're trying to build at Parks and Trails, is a statewide coalition that includes not just the usual suspects, right? But folks from both sides of the aisle and also just all sectors. And it's just wonderful to see the public health sector being much more involved in this work for obvious reasons. County Executive McMahon mentioned, elderly folks wanting to age in place, people wanting their kids to ride to school, right? There's just so much opportunity to build a broad and effective coalition to just get the work done and do the stuff that you might not be able to do otherwise because of politics. And just the past couple weeks, we've, I think, achieved a nice critical mass with downstate developers who have had so much success with their trailside developments that they're looking further afield and looking to really optimize that grand bargain between the public sector and the private sector, where I think I had a slide earlier that I sort of skipped over. But what developers want more than anything is predictability, right? They want to be able to know that if they're coming in to do a development, that it will get done expeditiously, so they don't have to waste a lot of time and money. And so the more developers I'm talking to, they're saying we would love to invest in more communities if we knew that the zoning code and the approvals were going to go. And this is something you already know, of course. But it's really fascinating to see this trail-oriented community come around and coalesce around this common vision. Andrew, how much time do I have left? 8 minutes, perfect. Okay, I have 10 actions, so that's less than 1 minute per action. I want to leave you guys with some tangible stuff, right? Not just pronouncements. So first, if you want to stay abreast of all this stuff and more, please subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that on our website. Lots of good stuff there, especially if you're following the state budget saga, as of course many of us do. We don't know if we're going to have an on-time budget next week. I think Speaker Hasty said that it might take a few more weeks. But there's a lot in this budget that's going to matter for you all, for your state parks and for your greenway trails. There's new spending that we're trying to make happen, and would love to see you get more involved. We do a big park advocacy day, as I mentioned. You can come next year and lobby shoulder to shoulder with us. We have a big statewide conference in October, and our two keynote speakers are Jeanette Sada-Khan, who's the former illustrious commissioner of the New York City Department of Transportation that I mentioned, that I'm sure many of you know or know of, and Ryan Chow, who's the executive director of the Rails to Trails Conservancy. But really, this is about anyone who wants to expand their greenway network. Hot topics are going to include maintenance, right? And of course, trail-oriented development. So we want to see you in Kingston in October. Our big ride, hundreds of people are going to be riding through Syracuse this July 17th. We're going to be staying in Burnett Park, and we're going to have a big party. You're all invited. Anyone ever ridden their bikes from Buffalo to Albany or
Syracuse?
Oh, nice, beautiful, beautiful. So don't miss that. NACTO. So Ryan Russo, my good friend Ryan Russo, is the new executive director at the National Association of City Transportation Officials. And NACTO is kind of like the antidote to AASHTO. So if AASHTO has ever stymied a project of yours that seeks to improve walkability or bikeability, NACTO is the antidote to that. But every tech hub in New York City, large and small, worth their salt, is a NACTO member. So if you guys really want to elevate your game and sort of bring your transportation network into a place where you're competing with the San Jose's and Indianapolis's of the world, please consider joining NACTO. It's a great way to get in the mix with your peers and talk about all the issues that are front and center for your plan. So do that. These are two great documentaries that you might want to check out. The Human Scale, featuring Jan Gehl, the famous Danish urban designer who is all about placemaking. Anyone a member of the Syracuse bike party? No. All right. You don't look too proud. You don't look too proud. You certainly.
I'm on the list, so I've actually gotten one.
Well, just on a whim, I found the Syracuse bike party online, and on a whim, it's always dangerous to ask questions on the internet if you don't know what the answer is going to be. But I got some great responses from folks who are looking forward to the extension of the Creek Walk Phase 3 and looking forward to, again, the improving safety on Route 11 and Route 31. But it seems like a pretty vibrant group, and even though we're not all bicyclists are kind of like the indicator species in the city, and they're often at the vanguard, and so I'll do what I can to encourage them to start getting involved in some of these larger issues. I mentioned this one already. Please reach out if you have any comments or questions. Look forward to coming back and doing what we can to facilitate your progress. And right now, there's actually an opportunity, and I think I sent this to Jeff. There's an opportunity to sign on to an initiative to increase state funding for greenway expansion. Right now, there's no dedicated source of capital money for greenway expansion, so we're trying to get that done with our partners from the Open Space Institute and other players in the parks and recreation space. And so if you can, your organization, your county, your company, if you want to sign on, it's a very topical fight right now. I shouldn't say it's a fight. It's very, I think, easy and not controversial, but we have, I think, about 200 folks signed on already to establish this dedicated fund for greenway expansion. I guess I just want to conclude with what I started this little talk with, was, you have this tremendous opportunity to leave a legacy for future generations where livability and a healthy lifestyle and a more resilient economy that isn't just about attracting new tech, but is about tourism, real estate, local food and beverage, right? That whole diversity of economy that I think you really are looking to achieve, I think is possible in these investments in the recreational landscape. And what you've outlined in your Greenways and Blueways plan and your local economic opportunities plan, connecting to the Empire State Trail, I think is just like the perfect thing to double down on as you're considering how to steer this major investment in a way that yields an egalitarian quality of life and a more resilient local economy where everyone has an equal shot at access to nature and those times with family and friends that I think we know make up our overall quality of life. So thank you.